I'm Amber, 29 years old, and last month my grandfather left me his entire estate worth over $2 million. The day after the funeral, my mother Patricia demanded I sign it over to her. When I refused, all hell broke loose. This morning, I received a text about an important family meeting. Walking into my childhood home, I froze. My mother, siblings, stepfather, and two men in expensive suits stared at me. Amber, my mother said with a cold smile, meet our lawyers. I wasn't prepared for what happened next. If you're watching this, drop a comment telling me where you're from. Hit that like button and subscribe to see how I handled this unexpected ambush. My grandfather Harold wasn't just family, he was my hero. While most kids had posters of pop stars on their walls, I had a framed photo of my grandfather standing proudly in front of his first hardware store. He built his business from nothing, starting with a small loan and transforming it into a chain of stores across 3 states. Nothing worth having comes easy, Amber, he'd tell me, his voice always carrying that perfect mix of warmth and wisdom. My mother Patricia, on the other hand, never understood the value of hard work. As Grandpa's only daughter, she grew up expecting everything to be handed to her. Even as a child, I noticed how she'd roll her eyes whenever he talked about building character through adversity. My earliest memories include her explosive shopping sprees, the living room overflowing with bags bearing designer logos, followed by hushed arguments between her and my grandfather about money. By the time I was 12, our family finances were a disaster. Mom cycled through credit cards like seasons, maxing one out before moving to the next. My stepfather Craig enabled her, partly because he benefited from her spending and partly because confronting her led to explosive fights. They remortgaged our house twice before I graduated high school. Meanwhile, Grandpa took a special interest in me. He noticed how I'd linger in his office during family gatherings, fascinated by the ledgers and business reports scattered across his desk. When I was 13, he started bringing me to his main store on Saturdays. "You've got a good head for business, kiddo," he said one afternoon as I helped him review inventory reports. I'd just pointed out a discrepancy in the quarterly orders. "You notice things others miss." Those Saturdays became sacred. He taught me how to analyze profit margins, negotiate with suppliers, and most importantly, how to treat employees with respect. "Your business is only as good as the people who run it when you're not there," he'd say. When it came time for college, Grandpa sat me down for a serious talk. "What are you thinking, Amber?" he asked. "Business administration," I replied without hesitation. "With a minor in accounting." His eyes crinkled with pride. "Smart choice. Education is the one thing nobody can take from you." He offered to pay my tuition in full, but my mother intercepted. Suddenly, she was calling him daily, complaining about their mortgage, Rachel's medical bills, minor and mostly cosmetic, and Jason's special needs. He wanted a car for his 16th birthday. The money for my education mysteriously became family funds. I took out student loans instead and worked part-time at a local bookstore. Grandpa would visit me there, pretending to browse the business section while slipping me envelopes of cash. "Don't tell your mother," he'd whisper. "This is between us." As his health began to decline, our conversations grew more serious. I was 27 when he was diagnosed with congestive heart failure. During one hospital visit, after the nurses had left us alone, he gripped my hand with surprising strength. "I've watched how you handle money, Amber," he said. "You're the only one in this family who understands its value." "I learned from the best," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Patricia." He sighed heavily. "Your mother has never understood that money isn't just for spending. It's responsibility. It's security. It's opportunity." He looked at me with intense clarity. "I've made arrangements. You'll be taken care of." "Grandpa, don't talk like that. You're going to be fine." "Listen to me," he insisted. "When the time comes, there will be pressure. Standing your ground won't be easy." I promised him I would honor whatever decisions he'd made, though I didn't fully understand what he meant then. In his final months, he shared stories I'd never heard before about my mother's teenage years, how she'd stolen from his wallet, forged his signature on checks, and once emptied a savings account he'd set up for her college fund to buy a car. I failed her somehow, he confessed during our last real conversation. Gave her too much, perhaps, or not enough of what truly mattered. He squeezed my hand. But you, Amber, you turned out just right. A week later, he slipped into a coma. 3 days after that, surrounded by family, Harold James Matthews took his final breath. I felt a piece of myself leave with him. The reading of the will took place 2 weeks after the funeral. We gathered in Mr. Peterson's law office, a wood-paneled room that smelled of leather and old books. My mother arrived dressed in designer black, her eyes hidden behind large sunglasses despite the dim interior lighting. Rachel and Jason sat on either side of her, with Craig hovering protectively behind them. I sat alone across the table. Mr. Peterson cleared his throat and began reading. The first few minutes covered small bequests, charitable donations, items for distant relatives, a generous pension for his longtime housekeeper. Nothing surprising. Then came the bombshell. And to my granddaughter, Amber Nicole Matthews, I leave the remainder of my estate, including my business holdings, investment portfolios, real estate properties, and personal effects, with the exception of items specifically designated to others in this document. The silence that followed was deafening. I sat frozen, the magnitude of what had just happened washing over me in waves. Then my mother ripped off her sunglasses. "This is a mistake," she hissed. "Read it again." Mr. Peterson adjusted his glasses. "There's no mistake, Mrs. Carter. Your father was very specific in his instructions." "That's impossible." She slammed her hand on the table. "I'm his daughter. His only child." "Mom, please," I whispered, aware of the lawyer's uncomfortable expression. "Don't you, Mom, me," she snapped. "You knew about this, didn't you? You manipulated him when he was sick and vulnerable." Rachel jumped in, her voice trembling with either emotion or performance. I couldn't tell which. "Grandpa wouldn't do this to us. He loved us all equally." Jason remained silent, staring at his hands. Mr. Peterson interjected firmly. "Mr. Matthews was of sound mind when he updated his will 6 months ago. He was very clear about his wishes." My mother's face contorted with rage. 6 months ago? When he was already sick. This proves it was manipulation. The meeting dissolved into chaos after that. My mother threatened to contest the will. Craig made vague comments about family loyalty. Rachel sobbed dramatically. Throughout it all, I sat in stunned silence, the weight of my grandfather's trust pressing down on me. In the parking lot afterward, my mother cornered me against my car. "This is a simple fix, Amber," she said, her voice suddenly calm and reasonable. "Just transfer everything to me, and I'll make sure everyone gets their fair share." I looked into her eyes, so similar to mine in color, but lacking any warmth. "I need time to process this, Mom." "What's there to process?" Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "It's family money. It belongs to all of us." "That's not what Grandpa wanted." Her expression hardened. "You have no idea what he wanted. I was his daughter for 52 years. You were just a distraction in his old age." Those words stung more than I wanted to admit. "I'm not making any decisions right now. Don't be selfish, Amber. Your brother needs college tuition. Rachel's drowning in debt. Craig and I are behind on the mortgage again." "I thought you paid off the mortgage with the money Grandpa gave you last year?" She waved dismissively. "Things happen. Expenses come up. Like the brand new Mercedes in their driveway, I thought but didn't say." The next few days brought a barrage of calls and texts. Rachel called me a greedy bitch in a family group chat. Craig left voicemails about doing the right thing. Friends of my mother's, women I'd known since childhood, sent messages expressing their disappointment in my character. Jason was the only one who approached me differently. He showed up at my apartment 3 days after the will reading, hands in his pockets, looking younger than his 18 years. "I don't care about the money," he said quietly, "but Mom's on the warpath. I've never seen her like this. I'm sorry you're caught in the middle." "I meant it." He shrugged. "Just wanted to warn you. She's not going to let this go." A week later, my mother arranged a casual family dinner. The moment I arrived, she launched into a prepared speech about family unity and generational wealth. "Your grandfather built his business for all of us," she insisted, cutting into her steak with precise movements. "He never intended for one person to control everything." "Then why did he write the will that way?" I asked. "Because you manipulated him," Rachel snapped. "We all know you were his favorite. You used that." "That's not true." My voice came out smaller than I intended. "Then prove it," my mother said. "Sign the money over to me, and I'll distribute it fairly." "I can't do that." "Can't or won't?" Craig interjected. "Both." I stood up, dinner untouched. I promised Grandpa I would respect his wishes. His wishes were for the family to be taken care of. My mother shouted as I headed for the door. "And I intend to honor that," I replied. "Just not the way you're demanding." I left with their angry voices following me down the driveway. That night, alone in my apartment, I cried for hours. Not because I doubted my decision, but because I was losing my family in the process of honoring my grandfather's last wish. The weeks following the will reading were some of the hardest of my life. What started as direct confrontation evolved into something more insidious, a coordinated campaign to break me down emotionally. My phone became a portal for guilt and manipulation. Aunts I barely spoke to called to tell me how disappointed they were. Cousins sent texts asking why I hated the family. Even my mother's church friends reached out, quoting scripture about honoring parents and the evils of greed. "Family takes care of family" became my mother's mantra, repeated in daily voicemails when I stopped answering her calls. Rachel took a different approach, weaponizing our shared childhood. "Remember when Mom sold her engagement ring to pay for your braces?" she texted one morning. I did remember, and also remembered that Grandpa had given Mom the money for those braces, which she'd spent on a spa weekend before being forced to sell the ring. The pressure came from unexpected directions, too. My mother somehow got my coworkers' contact information and began calling my office. My boss, Barbara, called me into her office after the third day of these disruptions. "Amber, is everything okay at home?" she asked, concern evident in her expression. I explained the situation as professionally as I could. "Take some personal days if you need them," she offered. "And let reception know not to put your mother's calls through anymore." Social media became unbearable. My mother and Rachel posted vague statuses about toxic family members and financial abuse of elders. Distant relatives commented with supportive emojis, never knowing they were taking sides in a battle they didn't understand. I made the mistake of checking my mother's Instagram one evening and found photos of her shopping for a new car. "Treating myself through the grief #self-care," read the caption. This was the same week she'd texted me about being unable to pay utility bills. My suspicions grew, so I did something I never thought I'd do. I asked Mr. Peterson for records of my grandfather's financial support to my mother over the years. What I discovered was staggering. In the 5 years before his death, Grandpa had given my mother over $300,000, supposedly for house payments, medical bills, and education costs. The amounts had increased dramatically in his final year. "Your grandfather was very generous with your mother," Mr. Peterson noted diplomatically. Some might say, excessively so. That night, I received the most disturbing call yet from Craig, his words slightly slurred from alcohol. "You think you're so smart," he growled. "Little Miss Perfect with her business degree. Your mother is having panic attacks because of you." "I'm sorry she's struggling," I said, trying to remain calm. "No, you're not. You've always been selfish. Harold spoiled you rotten." "That's not fair." "No, what's not fair?" "Your mother deserves that money. She had plans for it." "What plans?" I asked before I could stop myself. He laughed bitterly. The house in Naples, for starters. We put a deposit down 6 months ago when the old man's doctor gave us the timeline. I felt physically ill. You were spending his money before he was even dead? It was going to be ours anyway, he slurred. Until you got involved. The call ended with veiled threats about legal consequences and family secrets. I sat in my darkened apartment, shaking. For the first time, I considered giving in, just to end the nightmare. The money wasn't worth this emotional torture. Ethan found me like that, curled on the couch in the dark. My boyfriend had used his emergency key after I'd missed our dinner date and wasn't answering texts. Talk to me, he said, pulling me into his arms. All of it. I poured everything out, the inheritance, the pressure, Craig's threatening call. Maybe I should just give them what they want, I concluded, exhausted. Ethan listened without interrupting, his expression growing increasingly concerned. When I finished, he took my hands in his. Amber, this isn't just about money anymore, he said gently. This is emotional abuse. And from what you've told me about your grandfather, giving in would betray everything he was trying to protect you from. But my family is showing you exactly why Harold made the choice he did. His voice was firm but kind. He knew this would happen. He was preparing you for it. That night marked a turning point. Ethan helped me set up an appointment with Samantha Reed, a lawyer friend of his who specialized in estate disputes. Just to understand your options, he insisted. Samantha's advice was clear. Document everything, restrict contact, and prepare for a potential legal battle. Based on what you've told me, she said during our consultation, your mother may be planning something more aggressive than just guilt trips. The inheritance is significant enough that she might take formal action. What kind of action? She might claim undue influence, suggesting you manipulated your grandfather. Or she might argue he wasn't of sound mind when he updated his will. He was perfectly lucid, I protested. I believe you. And the medical records will likely support that. But we should be prepared. Following Samantha's advice, I started recording